Are you ready? Stand by.
Welcome to the Three Gun Show. We are at SHOT Show 2017 with Breda USA's Jeff DiLazzaro.
Thank you, Dave.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing great.
Welcome to the show. It's great to have you here. We as Three Gunners have heard a lot about the Breda Shotguns in the last couple weeks. I had Josh Tarrant, one of the Breda USA shooters, on the podcast. He teased it out, and of course we're he's creating some buzz with like videos and everything of him getting used to his new shotgun. Jason Williams was nice enough to introduce us, and we are going to talk about Breda's reintroduction or introduction to the U.S. market.
Well, it's sort of a reintroduction. I want to thank you for having me on the show, and I want to thank Jason for having set it up, and Josh for having created all the buzz. Because without that, we would be sitting here today. So, but Breda is an Italian company. Mm-hmm. They've been making firearms for over 90 years. They've made locomotive engines, power plants. It was at one time it was a large conglomerate company. They even make cannons that go on ships.
Oh, no kidding.
But probably around the Second World War, the company was broken up into smaller pieces, and the Breda that I deal with in Italy is the civilian firearms division, and they've been making, like I said, firearms in Italy for 90 years. In the 50s, Abercrombie and Fitch had imported Breda for a short while, and Breda was actually the first semi-automatic shotgun that you could take apart and put back together with no tools. It was a contemporary of the Browning Auto 5.
Huh.
It was also the first shotgun to use removable choke tubes. So
wow.
Breda has been around for a long time. They're very popular in Italy and throughout Europe. And I happened to be in the Brescia Valley a few years ago and stumbled upon the company more or less by accident. I had emailed them because I was there on some other business, and they were kind enough to invite me to the factory. And the owner walked into the gun room and very politely asked me, who I was and what was I doing in his factory. And
wow, you really stumbled upon
it couldn't have been any luckier. And I explained that I was an attorney and I was an FFL and I was there on business. And with that, he asked me if I was Italian, and I said yes. And he told the lady I was meeting with, go take him on a tour of the plant. And so the 15 minutes that they'd allocated to me had expanded to about an hour tour of the plant. And so when we got done the hour tour, Olivanda, who was the export manager at the time, very, very nice lady. Unfortunately, she passed away since. But she said, Mr. Murrow Key would like to have lunch with you. Would you like to have lunch with him? I said, sure, why not? So we went to lunch, and Mr. Murrow Key explained to me that, the history I just explained to you, and that they've been, interested in getting into the U.S. market, and they had, experimented with certain importers here and there, but they now felt that it was necessary to create an actual infrastructure in the United States and have a presence. And he kind of put everything in, priority in terms of my credentials. He said, you're Italian, you're an attorney, and you're an FFL. How would you like to work with us? And so we, played footsies for a little while and talked about it. And we talked about the products that they had. And what I came to learn is that they're a very high quality product. The guns use the same inertia operating system that was invented by a gentleman by the name of Bruno Civillani, and who ended up selling that same technology to Benelli, who then made the inertia shotgun famous.
Right.
So in terms of the designs of the guns, they're substantially similar. They're almost identical to a Benelli. But where the differences begin are is our processes. They're made in much smaller quantities and what we would like to consider to a much higher quality standard. And so, for example, the greatest example is every one of our shotguns, the barrels on all of them, the hunting guns, the B12I, which we'll be talking about a little bit later, they're all drilled from a solid bar of steel, special tri-alloy steel that had actually been used in the machine gun barrels that they had made for the Italian army. And it takes 50 minutes just to drill the bore of one barrel. It takes 50 days to make a small batch of barrels. So after they drill the bore very slowly, it stays in the same machine, which mills the outside profile of the barrel. So the barrels are all perfectly concentric. The wall thickness is exactly the same. The steel has never been stressed, so it remains pliable yet strong. And then, for example, the ribs on all the guns. There's one guy who sits on the second floor of the factory in almost church-like quiet, and he puts the barrels in a jig, and he puts a piece of pure silver underneath each bridge piece, and he hand wires each rib onto the barrel. And I had asked what tension they tensioned them onto, and I wish I knew the guy's name. I always refer to him as Mario because it's terribly stereotypical.
I was going to go with Jim, but Mario is probably more correct.
Being Italian, I feel entitled to say that, So, and I said, well, whatever tension Mario thinks is best. I guess that's all he does all day, because if you tension the wire too tight, it'll create a wave in the rib.
Right.
If you don't tension it enough, it won't, hold. So then he puts it on a machine, make sure it's perfectly aligned. Then they hard solder the ribs to the barrels. Then two other guys put it in a different machine. They use a first pass to take the excess metal off the rib. Then they do it the second pass to checker the rib and set the point of impact on the gun. So, to kind of abbreviate the story, it's we use high quality materials, very high tech machinery, but that hand craftsmanship has not been lost. All the guns are hand fit.
Yeah.
I think the average employee has been, working in the gun industry for over 15 years, on the floor. So,
yeah, I mean, that sounds like the stories of like how they made like fenders for Ferraris and Lamborghinis, or if you've ever seen like any of the documentaries of how they do engraving on like sporting shotguns and stuff like that. There's like one dude that does it, and
it's exact. And it's funny because I'm a big car guy, and so I use a lot of car analogies.
Yeah.
But you're exactly right. One of our upland bird guns, the Thexantho Series. Actually, that's an interesting gun because it uses a vertical locking lug. When Mr. Civillani left Benelli, he ended up retiring with Breda, and he came out with the vertical locking lug that shows up on our Thexantho Series, which is a premium series of shotguns. And our Xanthos Gold, for example, was designed by Diego Bonsi of B&B and Cizioni, and they are laser etched and then hand engraved, and they use pure 24 gold wire, which is hand set into the receiver.
wow.
And really, really nice, fancy walnut, and the Breda and Italy appear on the gun in pure silver. So they're really a functional piece of art, like a Ferrari or
no kidding.
Lamborghini or something like that.
Well, that sounds pretty slick. The hand craftsmanship always fascinates me, and I always feel like it would be fun to have like a really nice engraved shotgun to shoot 3-gun with, and then dump it in a barrel and have everyone shout at you like, "What are you doing?"
Well, we may make that happen for you very soon. Because that was actually
some ducks on there or something.
I'll have to show you some pictures on my phone, because we have a gun called the Titano L that's also based upon our 930i sporting clay shotgun that has pheasants in gold and like baked enamels and whatnot. And with the next generation of that gun, it'll have the ability to accept an 18.5-inch barrel and a magazine extension tube.
Oh, no kidding.
At SHOT Show, one of the guns we're presenting is a gun that we've jointly developed with Salient Arms International. It's called the Breda Salient Gold, and it's our 930i sporting shotgun with the ability to accept a magazine extension tube, and they've lightened the bolts and tweaked the spring rates and that kind of stuff, and that'll be a gun that we'll be introducing within the next year. And then we've done a lot of good work with Iron City Rifle Works, and Jason's been super kind about his time and everything.
Yeah, Jason actually put one of those one of your first shotguns. Jason, which one was that? The Echo. He put one of those in my hands at the Three Gun Nation Eastern Regional this past year in 2016, and you mentioned it. They're very similar to the Benelli M2 because of the heritage of the designers and everything.
Correct.
And I had that in my hands, and I was like, "Holy cow!" And picking it up feels just as good as like a lot of shotguns that I've fired before. But it was interesting because at the time, I'd never heard of Breda, right? So I'm not Italian and I'm a dumb American, so I figured like Breda, and it's forgive me for saying, but it's similar to an M2. So I figured like, oh, this is probably like something made in Turkey or Russia or something like that, where it's like they just bought 4 Benelli M2s and knocked them off. And Jason filled me in on the backstory. I was like, oh, okay, well now I feel like a jerk. But
now Jason and I met at the NRA show, and I think he was walking past the booth, and his neck snapped back, and he saw the Echo T9, and he said, "What is this?" And I explained the history of the gun, and he says, "This would make a great 3-gun shotgun." I said, I kind of tricked it out that way for the show, hoping somebody would notice, and thank you for noticing. And so he came up from Alabama, and we took it out to the range and aired it out, and we've been working on it ever since. But our new shotgun, which Iron City Rifle Works team is running, is the Breda B12i. And what we've tried to accomplish with the B12i, as Josh has done a great job pointing out online, is we've tried to make it competition ready right out of the box. Kind of our unofficial motto is, competition performance out of the box. Now, whether you're shooting steel targets or clay targets or birds, being a big gun nut myself, I noticed that everybody seems to make certain modifications to the gun, and it always kind of puzzled me why none of the manufacturers were actually making those modifications at the factory. And I know I was always a little leery to just hand somebody my gun and you have somebody close one eye and drill holes into it, or cut the stock in half or whatever. So my first project with Breda Italy was the 930i Sporting. And I'd said, look, we need to have an adjustable comb. We need to have extended controls. It needs to have forcing cones cut, right at the barrel. Has a 10-8 tapered rib. We went back and forth. It was an interesting dialogue, and then so once we had kind of got past the 930i stage, the T9, which you saw, was originally offered in 2 lengths. It was their tactical gun. And it was offered in 30-inch and 32 inches. And I said, this
tactical gun in 30 inches?
I said, this is, don't use
must have some long hallways in Italy.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I said, what if somebody breaks into your house, they're robbing you. I said, your family's in danger, because I told them, I said, don't you have hacksaws in Italy? Because, you need to cut this barrel down to 18.5 inches, for it to be, saleable here. 24 inches at the most.
Mario spits at you because you want to take a hacksaw to his work.
And yeah, I think Mario would have too. To be honest with you, unless I cut it right at the perfect bridge line, I guess. But and I said, well, what if you want to shoot it out of a car window? And they said, well, why would you ever want to do that?
Yeah, it's. I was going to ask you about that. It's a completely different culture, right? I mean, in Italy, it's so I've spoken to some people, and I'm not well versed in it. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it's it's required to have a sporting purpose for any arms you own, right?
Well, it's yes. The gun laws in Italy are considerably, which is ironic because they're a big manufacturer of firearms.
Huge, yeah.
But gun ownership in Italy is very restricted as compared to here. Mm-hmm. And when I explained to them that we have a Second Amendment right here to keep and bear arms, I mean, it was just like their eyes open. Like they couldn't believe that, I had, you were allowed to own, all these guns, you know? And when,
buy them at the hardware store in Wisconsin.
Yeah, no. And one of the first, pieces of culture shock for them is they came over here for a sporting clay tournament, and we were just handing people demo guns, and they're like, you're not allowed to even hand somebody a gun in Italy. It has to be tethered to your booth, basically. So
wow.
The idea of a demo day is outlawed.
Wow.
So it's very interesting that they have such a wonderful heritage of making great guns, but their gun culture is so different from ours.
Yeah, and it's also interesting that here we are in like 2017, and there's YouTube and all that, and Instagram, and they didn't notice that. Oh, we should be in the U.S. market.
Well,
like they're just doing their thing for 50 years.
Well, it's a very popular brand there, and they saw the U.S. market as being really not necessary, I guess. Okay. And I think as the gun laws in Europe have become tighter, mm-hmm. And they're smart business people as well. And Michele Murrow Key is the youngest generation in the business, and he sees that the U.S. market is the future of their business, mm-hmm. If they're going to continue to be successful. And I've been very fortunate to work, with good people there and here as well. And, we, walked around and we took a look at what people were doing to their guns. And with respect to the B12I, as Josh pointed out in the video, we've cut out the magazine port so that it could be quad loaded right out of the box. It comes with an extended bolt handle, extended release. Any magazine extension tube that would fit on your M2 will fit on our, the B12I. Mm-hmm. The hand guard, there's a positive engagement when it clicks onto the barrel. So everything's very rigid in terms of the platform of the gun. And we've had just, frankly, a better response than we could have ever hoped for, because we got the first batch of guns in, and within 2 days they were gone.
Oh, wow.
So we're actually waiting for the next batch to come in because they had to order more 24-inch ribs, because I think that they were a little bit skeptical that I could sell a gun with that short of a barrel, actually. So
it's funny because, like, a couple years ago, that would have been considered a long barrel for a 3-gun, but a lot of guys are shooting 24 now, and like you said, we were here at SHOT Show, and you walk around like any of the shotgun booths, and anything that has a duck or a picture of a duck or a goose behind it has a 30 or 28-inch barrel.
Right. Well, the great thing about this particular gun is it's a very universal shotgun. You throw a 28-inch or even 24-inch barrel on it. It comes in 18.5-inch. We will introduce a 21-inch barrel. 24 is a length that we've had a lot of demand for, but it comes with 28-inch and 30 inches. And it makes it a really good hunting gun as well, because, and again, we were really surprised with the response, because I took mine with a 30-inch barrel to the sporting clay range, which also happens to be a hunting preserve. the duck hunters were coming up to me saying, what is that? And then they said, well, with that loading port, it would make it really easy for us to load the gun with gloves on, or to get one more shot off, and so on and so forth. So
that's when I'm sorry to interrupt.
No.
But when Jason told me about Breda, he's like, go and look at their website. And obviously I couldn't read any of the literature because it was in Italian, but I got to look at the pretty pictures, which is all I wanted to do anyway. And the receivers were cool because it actually did have like a very unique loading port to it, and I thought like, wow, that could use very little work to become a 3-gun model. But I was looking specifically at the Sporting Clays model that you were talking about.
Well, you have to go to BredaUSA.com. So
right.
BredaUSA.com, and they'll, there's a lot more.
And then I can actually read the facts there.
It'd be a little easier, unless you're using it as a tutorial on Italian. Yeah. So,
nice. Well, so Jeff, what is it like to? So you're a lawyer, and shh, but we like you anyway. No, I'm teasing.
Thank you, appreciate that.
But when I think about like the headache and the paperwork and the red tape to get a new firearm into the United States, I think like, God, I'm so glad that Jeff's doing that and not me. What was that process like? And then this is SHOT Show 17, so you probably started this a couple years ago, right?
Oh yeah. I've gotten much more efficient at it, and having practiced law for 22 years, I've filled out many a form. So this wasn't something that was unfamiliar to me.
Right.
But you had mentioned sporting purpose under the Gun Control Act. In order to import, actually the Gun Control Act says you can't import any firearms into the U.S. at all,
right,
unless it meets certain exceptions. Now there's exceptions for military and law enforcement weapons, but the most common exception that all the guns, most of the guns we're seeing here at the SHOT Show come in under is the sporting purposes test.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if the gun is for a sporting purpose or is reasonably adaptable to a sporting purpose, you're allowed to import it. And so there's a form called Form 6 that you need to fill out, and you need to describe the name of the manufacturer, the name of the model, every barrel length, what the overall barrel lengths of all those are. And then ATF's discretion, they may ask for samples for them to, examine and score the guns to see if it does in fact, meet the sporting purposes test. So I've done quite a bit of reading on that, and I'd also have to say that the people at ATF that I've dealt with have always been very, very helpful to me. So I think that if you they want to see gun ownership in the U.S., believe it or not. I think there's a misperception that they don't.
That really, really, really surprises me.
Well, if there was no gun ownership, they'd be kind of out of a job. If you look at it that way.
It's true.
So, I mean, they're not saying machine gun in every pot, but
someday.
Let's hope. We'll see what this presidency brings, right? So, and then it needs to come in through a U.S. customs agent into a customs bonded warehouse, and of course, Uncle Sam. One of the reasons that the U.S. government would want to see the guns continue to come in is we pay 11% excise tax, and actually that 11% excise tax goes to wildlife preservation.
Yeah.
So now it also seems to come out of my pocket, but I guess it's for a good purpose.
Yeah, exactly. And it's said that gun owners and hunters have done more for wildlife preservation than any other advocacy group that wants to shut down gun owners and hunters too. So with that 11%, unfortunately, I don't like any taxes at all, but this one is hard to argue with.
Well, until you have to pay it. So
exactly. I'm not a tax guy, but
I fortunately I'd studied quite a bit of tax law in law school. So somebody had said to me, "Well, how did you go from lawyer to firearms importer.
International arms dealer.
Yeah, my friends kid me about that. They said you're literally an international arms trafficker.
My
now,
business
so.
cards would say that if I worked for you.
Yeah, well,
Dave Hartman, international arms dealer.
maybe I'll have to change my title on my
I
business
would,
card.
man.
It certainly sounds much more interesting than
Yeah, interesting and nefarious, and probably comes up with some interesting follow up questions from people as well.
I'm sure it would, but I think it would be difficult to do what I do without my legal background.
Sure.
And you also have to understand that you can go to jail if you're in violation of the law.
Oh, of course. I joke, but I'm not involved in it, so I don't have any skin in the game. So
yeah. Well, I'm a little more cautious about it.
No, I understand. So Jeff, when once you've got all the paperwork filled out and they've approved you for bringing in these shotguns, you go through your importer and everything. You've got massive stacks of shotguns in a warehouse somewhere. How do you decide what markets you serve first?
Well, we've had to work on that, and it's been a learning curve, and that's the reason why we're sold out of the B12I right now, because obviously we make adjustments to the gun. I think again, one of the things I have to give Breda Italy credit for, and they're not always happy to hear these things from me, is whenever I've had a constructive criticism, initially there's some pushback because it's not easy to change a manufacturing plant.
Of course.
To cut this a little higher or lower or, whatever. But they've been very responsive to that. And so we're kind of getting our timing down on as far as what market to cater to first. And, I run the company with really what I'd like to consider to be a common sense approach. The people who've been helpful to me, like Jason, Salient, I take care of them first, and, I met with a dealer yesterday and they said, well, what's it take to become a dealer? And, do I have to mortgage my house? And, I said, no, we'll sell you a gun. And if you like that gun and sell it, then we'll sell you 2 guns. And if you sell those, then we'll sell you 10. I don't want to sell people a product that they don't like and isn't going to get sold on their shelf. And when I got my FFL, I was surprised. I was very enthusiastic, and I called all these big companies and said, I want to be a dealer, and they said, well, talk to our distributor, and to be a factory direct dealer, you do have to place
large orders. Yeah. And that's what, sorry to interrupt you again.
No,
Jeff,
sure.
I think a lot of people don't realize, or just maybe are not interested in like how the firearms industry works. But when you as an individual go to your local gun shop, and they've got 15, 20 guns in the case, if they're like a small place, not like a Cabela's or something, 90% of those people are buying them from like 1 or 2 distributors in the United States, right? But they don't have the money to go to Smith & Wesson and say like, I want 85 M&P pistols. They get them a couple at a time until they sell them.
No, that is true. And, we, what I found over the course of my legal career is you could make 10 good moves, but if you make 1 bad move, it could negate, all the benefit. And so one of the things we've tried to do is not make any mistakes. And we've moved, cautiously forward. And it's been a good approach. And like I said, we're using a common sense approach. So we're not going to put, one dealer on top of another.
Sure.
Because, we take care of the people who take care of us. And if we feel that the dealers that we have in a particular area are, servicing the needs of, the consumers in that area, that we're going to let them do that, because I think it's important to educate people on any new product, especially guns, because there's a lot of subtle differences that certainly aren't apparent looking at it from 10 feet away on a gun shelf. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
exactly. And, in this industry, like the automotive industry that we were talking about a minute ago, there's a lot of brand loyalty as well.
No, there is. And I've had, that conversation with a number of people, and they come over and I tell them, how the barrels are made. And, the first question they ask me is, well, how much more than a Benelli is it? And I explain to them it's actually less expensive than a Benelli. And then they tell me it's not cheap enough, So if I'm going to spend that kind of money, I might as well buy a Benelli. And I said, well, it's a great gun. Go buy it. You're going to wish you bought this gun later on.
Right.
I think, but
I'm cracking up because I've heard like so many people say that already, and specifically on the B12i, because there's been a lot of buzz about it, and threads on 3-gun talk and 3-gun information events and all the other 74 Facebook groups that are talking about 3-gun shotguns, and that's like the common thing is like, how much is it? And it's like, well, it's less than a Benelli. It's like, well, if I'm going to spend that much, that is the exact way that thread goes. It's hilarious.
It's been interesting for me because, again, it's you practice law for 22 years, and there's a specific issue or problem that you're trying to identify and resolve, whereas this is a different experience where I'm trying to run a company, and if sometimes the responses you get are a little bit surprising.
Sure.
So, but I've had people. I had somebody call me up and they asked me about our Grizzly, and the guy just went on, and and I could tell the reason he was so cautious is he didn't have a lot of money, and he was really stretching his budget to he wanted to buy a shotgun that was going to last him a long time.
Sure.
And finally, I said to him, I said, look, I'm going to send you the gun, okay? You pay me for it, and go shoot it. And if you don't like it, send it back to me, and I'll send you back your money. And he's like, wow, that's a great deal. I said, no other manufacturer in the United States would ever do that.
No.
And he says, now I'm not, saying that I'm going to, I'm not in a position to do that, but this particular, for everybody, but this particular guy just kind of struck me. And then the funny thing, he says, well, I'm Canadian, so I couldn't sell him the gun anyway. So, we spent an hour on the phone, with him quizzing me about the gun. And, finally I kind of gave him an offer he couldn't refuse. And, so, but,
figures.
The funny thing is we have, Cabela's in Canada does carry Breda, and we've had a lot of people from, although they're not being sold in Cabela's presently in the U.S., and that's really not, my model necessarily. But we've had a lot of people reach out to us from Canada about the B12i and the sporting guns, and so once I've gotten a handle on this market, that's something that we would have to look at seriously.
Sure. So the B12i is the 3-gun model.
Correct.
And you have models for all kinds of other sports as well that are larger than our little niche world we like to think is the biggest thing going, right? Especially hunting, right? So. Well, are you looking into like the hunting world as well to serve that market?
Well, in fact, we're in the hunting market. We're sponsoring the Grind Waterfowl TV in
cool.
2017. I met with Ricky Hart from Lucky Duck this morning. He's shooting a Breda Grizzly, and he actually told me a story, which I wish he was actually here to tell you, because he had taken a journalist out hunting, and she had dropped the gun in and he said she was about 105, 110 pounds, and she shot our Breda Grizzly, which is a 3.5-inch Magnum shotgun, all week, and loved it. And I'm hoping to hear from her as well. But she happened to drop it in a puddle or something, and he just threw it in the case, threw it in the back of his truck, and they took off. Well, there was a huge temperature change between where they were and and their destination, and the next day he went out to his truck and he realized he had left the gun in the truck overnight.
Oh man!
And it had frozen solid. So and his hunting buddies were kind of busting his chops, like, why, how could you treat that gun like this? And so he said, well, I told him I was going to, test it for him, and I was going to beat the hell out of it. And it's funny because it seems to be a common thread with hunters, because Josh Neuweiler, who's an 8-time world goose calling champion, he said the same thing. I mean, I handed him the gun, and he says, and I said, test it, and and the next thing he says, I'm never ever going to clean it. I'm going to dip it in salt water every day, kind of thing. And and maybe I'll hit it with some WD-40 if I'm feeling kind. But Ricky
sounds like AR-15 testing.
It was. Well, Ricky takes the gun, he bangs it on the ground until the ice breaks off of it, threw 3 shells in it, and never missed a beat. So now. I wouldn't have dared to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's kind of ballsy.
And I told him, I said, I wish you had that on film. I would have, it's priceless, But again, whether you're shooting birds or steel targets or clay targets, what we're aiming to give you is the best possible performance that you can get in that area. Mm-hmm. I mean, our focus initially was mostly on sporting clays, selfishly because I'm a sporting clay shooter.
Sure. Scratch your own itch.
And well, I actually, I had been a pistol shooter and a rifle shooter, and I was probably weakest with a shotgun, which is kind of ironic again. But and then my local indoor pistol range burnt down. And I walked into a gun shop, and I was lamenting to a friend of mine that I was going to have to dust off the golf, clubs. And he says, no, come shoot sporting clays with us. So I went out, and
it's the golf of clay sports.
That's the way everybody says. It's like golf with a shotgun.
Yep.
And so it became addictive, and so I said, okay, well, I'll get better at clay shooting, and then I'll go shoot 3-gun. And it never dawned on me that we have a 6-round magazine capacity limit in New Jersey where I live, which made it very difficult for me to go run 3-gun, of course. So I really haven't quite made it to the 3-gun arena myself, but I'm looking forward to going out to some of the events and stinking up the place a little bit. So
sweet. Well, it's a steep learning curve, but it's definitely worth it, and it's addicting. So make sure you've got the pocketbook ready to go.
I believe I've spent some money on guns in my day, and my waistline could probably use a little bit of running and gunning. So
nice. With
sporting clays, you ride around in a golf cart and load 2 shells at a time. So it's not particularly rigorous. But
right.
It is challenging though. I consider it more of like karate with a shotgun than golf, because there's very subtle differences in terms of your hold point and break point that make a huge difference in your score. And I've had the benefit of some really good instruction that's helped steepen my learning curve on that. And so I'm sure it's probably 3 times as hard with 3-gun, because you have 3 different disciplines.
Yeah, of course. Well, and we live in a unique world, right? As 3-gunners, I actually went to shoot sporting clays with some 3-gunners that would be in the top 20 in the nation, and it was they were super humbled by sporting clays, so it was kind of nice to be able to suck as bad as someone else that normally trounces you in a different arena.
Oh yeah,
it was kind of cool.
No, it's certainly an equalizer for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So Jeff, I thank you for your time for sharing the story of Breda. You've got like a pretty good future vision, and it sounds like you're doing some cool stuff with Saline and of course Iron City Rifle Works and everything. If folks are interested in getting their hands on one of the Breda 3-gun shotguns, how do they do that?
They could contact me either through our website. They contact the company directly. We have dealers listed on our website. If there's a dealer in their area, I know Iron City Rifle Works is a dealer, in Alabama. If there's a dealer in their area, then we encourage them to go through their local dealer. Because there's certainly a benefit to putting the guns in your hands. And, I'm not this wise. I'd read this before. So, quality isn't something that you could put a gauge on, but it's something that you know when you see it. Okay. And you know even more when you feel it. And so when you see our guns, you should at least have the strong suspicion that they're a quality gun. When you pick them up and you put it to your shoulder, you could really feel the difference. And when you shoot the guns, the difference becomes really apparent because they shoot point of impact. They don't shoot slightly to the left or slightly to the right. Mario made sure of that for everybody.
Right.
And because the barrels are drilled and the time-consuming process that we use for our barrel making, everybody comes back and says the same thing: is that they're just crushing, clay targets at 70 yards that before they were just taking a chip off of. If it's bird hunting, that they're just folding. I mean, the bird's hitting like a brick wall and going straight down. And I attribute that to the quality of the barrels. And Josh was telling me recently that he had gone out. We'd gotten about 11 inches of snow down in Maryland, where he lives, and his gun was the only one that didn't jam, and he was the only one, shooting a Breda. So when I hear those types of stories, it really makes me happy that I'm associated with a quality product and quality people that we have around us. So if there's a dealer in your area, go to them. If not, go to our website, or you could email me at jeff@bredausa.com. There's some dealers we have that are not listed on our website yet. And if there is no dealer in your area, then go in and ask for Breda because, they
create the demand.
Yeah. Because dealers aren't going to, in this day and age, what I've found is dealers are reluctant to take on a new brand because there are so many new good brands and it's hard to weed out the good ones.
Sure.
Unless customers are going in and asking for the gun. And so if if there is no dealer in your area, and if you can't convince your local dealer to carry us, then we'll ship it to an FFL of your choice, and hopefully when they see the gun in person, they'll recognize the quality as well.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to be shooting with Josh Tarrant in a couple weeks, maybe a month here or something like that. So I'm gonna see if he'll let me get some time behind it here, and I know there's been a lot of buzz about the Breda Shotgun. So Jeff, thank you for taking the time to be on the Three Gun Show here and tell people about the story of Breda USA.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
If you are finished, unload, show clear.